Can you guys see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Good morning and happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioner's weekly meeting for February 14th, 2024. Commissioner Plant, any preliminary matters? Are you prepared to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will be your Valentine, and I will.
I don't recall asking you. I may need others' approval on that. Commissioner Gilman.
Sure, there's some sort of rule that would be breaking.
Yeah, ex parte.
Happy Valentine's
Open meeting.
Day. No passing doilies with hearts back and forth. And I would vote to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, as would I. With that, let's turn to proceeding number 22M-0171. Ms. Shula, Commissioners Information Meeting. You and I guess Commissioner Gilman.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. This is Jessie Shula with your advisors staff. This morning, I'm introducing a Commissioner Information Meeting that Commissioner Gilman has scheduled for March 6th, 2024 on community engagement. The meeting was proposed in staff's work plan for this proceeding filed this past fall. Notably, there's no decision being made this morning, so there's no vote taking place. Rather, this is an informational update to raise awareness about the Commission Information Meeting. As such, my presentation will include a brief procedural context and an overview of the meeting objectives, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Gilman to add any additional remarks. For context, staff issued a work plan which included this Commission Information Meeting on community engagement in response to direction from Commissioner Gilman last fall. This information meeting is part of the Commission's ongoing efforts to implement Senate Bill 21-272, which directs the Commission to consider equity in all of its work. The Commission recognizes that a key component of considering equity in all of its work is to understand community needs and to understand how communities are impacted by the actions taken by regulated entities so that equity can be adequately considered. This meeting will support the commissioners in understanding how community engagement is conducted at other commissions and what learnings we can use from other commissions to apply to our own commission, and then how other commissions and state agencies are determining if engagement is meaningful. With that, there are a few objectives for the meeting. Those are to learn some other regulatory environments, ecosystems for community engagement, including which organizations are conducting engagement, how information is flowing between organizations, and the timing and venues for engagement to ensure that communities are heard and their needs are brought into regulatory proceedings. Second, to understand how other commissions across the country are assessing the effectiveness of community engagement, as this is a relatively new endeavor for many of us. And third, to learn the requirements, metrics, and provisions that may exist in other regulatory environments to ensure that outreach is effectively elevating community needs. Staff will also provide a brief update on ongoing 272 activities in lieu of presentation at a March weekly meeting. So I will now turn it over to Commissioner Gilman for additional remarks.
Thanks, Ms. Chula. I appreciate it. And as always, the work Ms. Chula and Ms. Crandall and Ms. Bies are doing behind the scenes is incredibly valuable. So thank you very much for your support. Yeah, and really just wanted to have this on the agenda today, mostly as a public service announcement, as I like to do, about these upcoming events, and to ensure you two are in the loop. Hope you both will be able to attend if you're able. And I think our focus here is really as we continue to kind of move forward in the 272 work, first of all, understanding, as Ms. Chula said, what public engagement would and could look like, who might be conducting that, how we kind of understand what the messages are, and then what sort of outcomes could we be looking for? We're not looking for kind of outreach just to check a box and say it was done, but really to ensure that we have effective and meaningful engagement and outreach that's happening in these proceedings or around these issues. And so I'll be very interested to hear about items like that at the CIM, and just very appreciative of the team for putting it together. So hopefully you both will be available.
I am definitely confirmed and appreciate your leadership, Commissioner Gilman, as well as Ms. Crandall, Ms. Shula, and the rest of the team. And very much looking forward to the dialogue and conversation. Commissioner Plant, anything you'd like to add?
No, I just echo those thanks to Commissioner Gilman and also to Ms. Chula and the team. And I think I mean, this is it's a really important effort. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what other PUCs are doing a lot. I mean, we deal with so many issues that are impacting people's lives, and yet we're also restricted from talking about stuff. And so, how we can kind of, blend those two responsibilities to do outreach, but also, maintain the legal restrictions that we have on what we can and can't say. I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And then also about, what other agencies within Colorado are doing and how we can sort of, combine, and benefit from their actions, and they can benefit from our actions, and we can basically, lift all boats. So really looking forward to the conversation. And once again, thanks for bringing this forward. And I will also be there.
Yeah, I saw the draft agenda. Looks like an all-star lineup, both in Colorado and national best practice. So with that, I think Commissioner Gilman, you will be issuing a decision in the M docket scheduling SIM. Is that right, Ms. Shula, Commissioner Gilman?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Anything else for this now?
Nope, that's all. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Proceeding number 23M-0217R, RTD Oversight and Investigations. Ms. Saba, Dr. Fishaber.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you. It's Jessica Saba with the Rail Transit Safety Section. On February 8th, 2024, staff submitted the semi-annual virtual and on-site safety audit 2 of RTD and submitted a report of those findings to the commission for review. In this audit, there was one finding of non-compliance made during the audit. 12 checklists were reviewed for the fall 2023 audit 2. 8 checklists were in SMS areas of safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion in the RTD's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. In addition to those 8 checklists, there were 4 checklists completed to determine if RTD followed its safety and security processes and procedures. I will pause for questions or am ready for recommendations.
If you can make your recommendation, that'd be great.
Thank you. Staff recommends that the commission approve the semi-annual virtual and on-site safety audit report dated February 8th, 2024.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision adopting the audit report, Ms. Saba. So
Thank you.
Proceeding number 23AL-0579G, Atmos Energy filing to eliminate construction allowances. Mr. Davis, Ms. Dundas.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the commission's advisory staff. Today, we're bringing back the tariff filing that Atmos Energy Corporation submitted pursuant to Senate Bill 23291. That bill included provisions that require each of Colorado's 4 investor-owned gas utilities to file with the commission no later than December 31st of last year, an updated tariff to reflect the removal of any incentives for an applicant to establish gas service to a property. I presented Atmos's filing to you at the December 27th weekly meeting because it was the first of the 4 utilities to file tariff sheets reflecting the revisions to a line extension policy. And recall that staff of the commission had filed a protest to Atmos's filing, claiming that the company eliminated only the company's construction allowances for service lines from its tariff, and further explaining that Senate Bill 291 requires that all incentives must be removed from a gas utility's tariff. And according to staff, Atmos's proposed tariff revisions do not include, for example, the removal of the incentives of a utility-provided meter or other infrastructure associated with the addition of a new customer. So at the December 27th weekly meeting, the Commission set the Atmos matter for hearing and set a notice and intervention period. The notice and intervention period has now concluded, and both staff of the Commission and the utility consumer advocate have filed notices of intervention of right and requests for hearing. Now, last month, after all 4 utility filings were available for your review, I presented the filings from the other 3 gas utilities and discussed the provisions for line extensions in the Commission's gas rules that were adopted just prior to the passage and signing of Senate Bill 291. And this morning, I'd like to recommend that the Commission take the same action for Atmos that it took for those other 3 utilities. Specifically, I recommend that the Commission waive on its own motion the December 31st, 2024 deadline in Rule 4210. As we discussed last month, Rule 4210C states that line extension policies should be based on the principle that the connecting customer pays its share of the estimated full incremental cost of growth. And Rule 4210D states that the line extension allowances should be updated pursuant to 4210C in a base rate proceeding or in another application proceeding as required, but that should be implemented then no later than December 31st of this year. And also consistent with my recommendation last month for the other gas utilities, I recommend that the Commission now refer this Atmos matter to an ALJ. The waiving of the deadline in 4210T will permit the matter to be addressed efficiently by an ALJ. And again, this approach makes sense to advisors because the elimination of all incentives is a continual process, and other provisions in Senate Bill 291 don't neatly match the December 31st deadline contemplated in the Commission's gas rules. So a draft order has been circulated that accomplishes the waiver of the rule and the referral to an ALJ. I can answer questions, or you can move on to a discussion and a vote.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision. Mr. Davis waiving the deadline and referring the matter to an ALJ. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 23A-0216G, Atmos Energy DSM Strategic Issues Proceeding. Mr. Greenberg.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Greenberg of your advisory staff. Atmos filed its strategic issues application on May 1st of 2023. Staff and UCA intervened, and SWEEP and EOC were granted intervention. Following submission of answer and rebuttal testimony, all parties signed on to a unanimous but partial settlement agreement on November 2nd of last year. The sole issue left unresolved by the settlement was whether Atmos Energy should be required to implement a beneficial electrification or BE program. Staff and UCA took no position on this issue, but SWEEP and the company subsequently filed testimony arguing their positions. ALJ Han filed her recommended decision R24-0016, which I'll refer to as the RD, on January 9th, approving the settlement and deciding that she would not require Atmos to include a BE program in its next DSM plan application. On January 24th, the Commission decided to stay the recommended decision on its own motion to provide additional time to consider the ALJ's RD. The Southwest Energy SWEEP timely filed exceptions to RD 24-0016 on January 29th, and Atmos filed its response to the SWEEP exceptions 1 week later. So the question before you this morning is whether to adopt ALJ Han's recommended decision with or without modifications, or to set aside the recommended decision and adopt an entirely new decision on Atmos's application. Advisors suggest the Commission discuss 2 decision points. First, whether to grant SWEEP's exceptions to ALJ Han's decision and require Atmos to file a BE program as part of its next DSM plan application. And second, whether to modify the recommended decision further by modifying the DSM bonus mechanism established by the settlement approved by the recommended decision. I'll present the issues in that order. In its exceptions, SWEEP argues that although the legislature has not mandated that gas-only utilities must implement BE programs, it has certainly opened the door to that by expanding the definition of DSM to include BE, by designating BE as a clean heat resource, and by requiring the Commission to allow gas utilities to field BE programs. SWEEP argues that the Commission has the authority to require Atmos to field a BE program, and that not doing so gives the company veto power in contravention of the legislature's clearly expressed intent to begin the process of decarbonizing gas utilities, in part via BE. SWEEP contends that the RD's concern about unjust rates due to the potential impact on non-participating customers is based on an incorrect characterization of the beneficial electrification programs, emphasizing that most customers who receive incentives are likely to remain Atmos customers and continue to purchase gas. SWEEP challenges Atmos's argument that charging gas customers for incentives to convert others to electric service would be unfair, pointing out that the impact on utility revenues from beneficial electrification programs is analogous to other DSM programs that reduce gas usage and overall sales. In sum, SWEEP contends that the Commission should amend and reverse the recommended decision, asserting its authority to direct Atmos to propose BE incentives. It underscores the importance of beneficial electrification in Colorado's decarbonization strategy. Atmos makes the following arguments in its response. SWEEP's exceptions brief itself admits that Colorado law authorizes but does not require utility clean heat plans to include BE, and the RD therefore properly found that Atmos should not be required to provide incentives for BE. In response to SWEEP's arguments about legislative intent, Atmos contends that if the legislature had intended that the Commission require gas utilities to engage in BE, it certainly could have included that requirement in its legislation, but it chose not to. Atmos argues further that requiring it to provide incentives for BE would unlawfully require gas customers to, in effect, make transfer payments to customers no longer served by Atmos because they have converted to electricity. The company claims this violates the mandate in Section 40-3-101 of Colorado Revised Statutes that, quote, all changes made, demanded, or received by any public utility for any rate, fare, product, or commodity furnished or to be furnished, or any service rendered, shall be just and reasonable, end quote. Atmos argues that requiring its customers to pay to convert some customers, in whole or part, to electric customers would be inconsistent with the principle that rates must reflect the cost of providing service and would therefore not be just and reasonable. Atmos also argues that not all electrification is environmentally beneficial, as is required to meet the statutory definition of BE. The company notes that SWEEP failed to identify any of the electric suppliers in Atmos Energy's service territories or the carbon intensity of their supply, so there's no evidence that conversions to electricity would actually reduce emissions. Finally, the company contends that a requirement to implement BE would have a detrimental effect on the company's ability to recover its fixed costs, resulting in the need to decouple rates, file a rate case, or both. The company states that it should not be required to fund incentives for BE given the detrimental effect electrification will have on its business and its customers. The company concludes that to the extent electrification meets the statutory definition of BE, incentives for electrification should come from electric utilities. It states that it is unlawful and unfair to require Atmos Energy's customers to fund incentives for BE, given the impact electrification is expected to have on gas utility rates, and it urges the Commission to confirm the recommended decision. I will pause here for your deliberation or can provide a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with the ALJ on this one. You know, I think we have existing tax credits, we have existing incentives. Most electric utilities have both incentives as well as incentives for their customers, as well as incentives to you know, draw customers into electrification. So I think adding the gas company to that is probably not a necessary step. And you know, I think that there is this sort of I think that beneficial electrification is coming, and I would disagree with some of Atmos's arguments on this, but I don't know that it's appropriate to have the gas company essentially pushing for the withdrawal of their customers from their service. I think that's more appropriate and easier to be done from the electric side.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I mean, to be sure, I think this issue of BE, especially in the gas only utilities, is going to be a very thorny one moving forward. And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, I think. So to me, I think it's important to kind of point out the interplay with other proceedings and kind of what discreetly we'd be deciding here. And kind of discreetly in the DSM bucket, I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Plant. You know, we don't have legislation that say that gas-only utilities need BE plans like we have for our electric-only IOUs, or sorry, our electric IOUs. You know, and I can't see my way to saying that it definitively must be a DSM offering by the gas-onlys through DSM, that is. But I think it's important to recognize kind of the interplay here with both the clean heat plans and the GIPs that we'll see related to Atmos as well as the other gas-only utilities. And I think certainly within those, it is possible, if not likely, you might end up with some beneficial electrification, you know, as we adjudicate those and see what that means going forward. Certainly beneficial electrification presents a promising decarbonization opportunity versus, you know, the combustion of methane. So I think we'll have to see as we litigate the clean heat plans, as we see the first GIPs, where we would be looking potentially at major cost avoidance through something like BE in NPAs, then I think some of these arguments look very different depending on the circumstance. So I would just kind of draw that line maybe in this decision, in this confirmation of the recommended decision, that particular to DSM plans, I don't really see anything to buttress us requiring it right here. That is not to say that in these other proceedings, it would not potentially be found to be a prudent step forward. So hopefully that's helpful clarification. And if you both agree with some of those points, maybe we can work some of that nuance into the decision, Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, and it just feels premature right now to go down this path, and it seems like we can get a little further with public service company where there's a combined electric and gas system, and start to figure out the economics of this a little better before doing what Sweep is suggesting. I also support your comments, Commissioner Gilman, about linking this to the clean heat plans and letting that process play out a little bit. So just back to you for a second, Commissioner Plant, are you okay with either an ABC or TBC decision? We'll take that up after Mr. Greenberg's second issue. But are you okay including the language Commissioner Gilman outlined?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mr. Greenberg, you have a second issue?
I do, yeah. There was an issue having to do with the structure of the DSM bonus that was approved by the settlement. I'm sorry, that was approved by the recommended decision. The bonus mechanism established by the settlement incorporates the social cost of emissions and non-energy benefits into the net economic benefits that the DSM bonus is based on. Given this substantial modification to the bonus mechanism, the ALJ required the company to respond to a set of questions investigating the impact of this change on the bonus the company would receive. In response, Atmos calculated that the SCE and net and non-energy benefits increased net benefits by a factor of 19 compared to the net benefits without those adjustments. As a result, the company's bonus would be about $580,000 if it achieved its savings target precisely, though the statutory provision that the bonus is limited to no more than 25% of expenditures would cap the bonus at $500,000. Assume the about 64,000 decatherm savings target established by the settlement, this $500,000 bonus would amount to $7.81 for each first-year decatherm saved by the program. The company's calculations demonstrate that that amount is over 6 times as great as the same ratio for the company's performance in 2022, a year in which both the social cost of emissions and non-energy benefits were excluded from the calculation of net economic benefits. Furthermore, Atmos calculated that it would hit the statutory cap on the bonus of 25% of expenditures when it had achieved just 96% of the savings goal established by the settlement. The settlement commits the company to a savings goal approximately twice as large as its previous goal. Even so, based on the analysis sought by the ALJ, the bonus established by the settlement could be viewed as excessive. Furthermore, in all of its recent decisions in DSM-related proceedings, the Commission has established or approved bonus structures that provide utilities with an incentive to push past their savings target, not hitting a cap until the utility achieves 125% of its savings target. If commissioners agree that the bonus established by the settlement requires modification, there are 2 options. The first is simply remove the social cost of emissions from the calculation of net economic benefits in favor of an incentive mechanism focused on overall emission reductions that could be adopted in Atmos's recently filed CHP application proceeding. Although this approach would require a waiver of Rule 4760F, it would be consistent with the Commission's reasoning that a CHP proceeding is the appropriate venue to evaluate and potentially incentivize overall emission reductions associated with the transmission, distribution, and combustion of gas by the company's gas customers. The second option would be to keep the SCE and non-energy benefits in the calculation of net benefits, but to modify the bonus mechanism so that it maintains a roughly similar bonus per decatherm saved as approved in the past. So if the Commission were to set this at $1.50 per decatherm of first-year savings, the bonus at 100% of target savings would be a bit over $96,000. And to keep the structure parallel to what the Commission has approved in other recent DSM cases, 60% of that amount would be available to the company at a threshold of 80% of target savings, and the rate of increase in the percentage of net benefits to which the company is entitled would be adjusted such that it would achieve its target bonus at 100% of savings goal and twice that amount at 125% of savings goal. So I'll pause here for your deliberations, or I can provide a recommendation.
Yeah, can I just ask a couple questions for clarifications? It sounds like no party is asking us to do this, so we'd be doing this on our own motion. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And do we have a record basis to support both those alternative paths forward, or are you or council concerned about the record basis to do that in this case?
I am joined by, I forgot to mention earlier, I'm joined by Alex Serra of Commission Counsel. There is no, so he may want to weigh in on this. There is no specific record basis. As I mentioned earlier, this case was settled. There were no discussions, no presentations of alternate bonus mechanisms.
Mr. Serra, any comments before I turn it over to my colleagues?
I apologize. It took a little bit to get the camera on here. Yeah, I appreciate what Mr. Greenberg is saying. I think what he's offering is that you all make a policy choice to better align the incentives for the programs with the goals of the program. But as he pointed out, this recommendation does not come with evidence in the record along the lines of a party suggesting this, testimony suggesting this.
And I'll say that parties were the settlement was adopted unanimously. So this is not a initiative by any of the parties. It's just that the mechanism established by the settlement is in pretty stark contrast to prior commission policy.
Well, I appreciate you both framing the issue. I've been struggling for months, years with black box settlements. It's easier when it's not unanimous. Commissioner Plant, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's a little it's problematic.
Awkward.
But I also think that, you know, from my perspective, I think the commission has stated a policy here and an inclination to try and address, you know, emissions related PIMs, you know, in a separate proceeding. Certainly, this is similar to a decision that we made in the PSCO strategic issues, and I think it would be a much more consistent policy for us to defer that that decision to the clean heat plan process. And again, I'm not sure about what the legal ramifications are of that, but I think that we've really, you know, I mean, we've made this pretty clear in our discussions previously that this is something that we want to address, but we also don't want to have set ourselves up for duplicate, you know, incentives. And I think that we need to consider it within its own proceeding.
Commissioner Gilman, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously understand it's not ideal to modify a unanimous settlement here. I also think it's generally not ideal to have social cost of emissions included in the cost effectiveness, but excluded from the net economic benefits as it pertains to the bonus. But the only thing I like less than those two is the really kind of nonsensical results that we get with this method. Where all of a sudden, for essentially, you know, very similar performance, you're getting a 6 times multiplier of a bonus that maxes out before you even get to the goal amount. You know, I just can't see my way to thinking that is a reasonable result that best serves the public interest here. So, you know, that being as it is, I do think it's more important to have a reasonable result here. That's not just reasonable in isolation inside of this proceeding, but also in the context of what we've already established we're trying to do elsewhere, whereby I think that it would be ideal to have carbon emissions measured within a clean heat plan proceeding with a PIM dedicated to that. You know, perhaps if there had been some adjustment or something that looked here to make more sense as far as what the bonus would end up in, you know, we really could have evaluated having the social cost of emissions be included in the net economic benefits, but I just don't see it here. I mean, this result just doesn't really make any sense to me for the bonus, and so I would prefer to treat it as we had with public service and indicate that this is an issue that we'd like to see within the clean heat plan as far as identifying a bonus for emissions reductions there.
So just before I share one idea, Mr. Greenberg, as I understood it, the target doubled. Is that right?
Yes.
And that increases lost revenues, which presumably this is a partial offset. So it's not like a 6-to-1 difference from what was previously. It's more like somewhere between a 50 and 100% increases. Is that fair? I mean, if you double the target, you double the lost revenues.
Well,
So,
I don't see it that way. To be honest, I think the lost revenue recovery structure in this that's provided for in the settlement is identical to that of the lost revenue provisions that the company's been working under for several years.
okay. Well, just one idea, which was, I wonder what you guys think about having a 3-0 decision saying that on this record, we're going to do exactly what you're suggesting, which is resolving this in the clean heat plan and not addressing and not doing what the settlement wants and the RD wants, but give the parties a chance to respond and see if they can clarify why they did this. I just found myself trying to, why would staff, why would you UCA agree to this? And I had no answer. So any thoughts on doing something like that? See if we can get a little bit of a better record or clarity about why this black box settlement landed where it did. So any thoughts on that, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's a process that we could do, I think that would help with clarification. And maybe, I don't know, would that help to establish a record or?
I think the record's closed is what Mr. Acera is going to say, but it may give us guidance with respect to the settlement agreement. Let's hear from Commissioner Gilman, and then I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Acera.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say this is essentially the exceptions phase, right? So we would still have RRR left to go. So to the extent that we make this decision now, based on what we see as being in the public interest with what's before us, in terms of a modification to the settlement agreement to exclude the social cost of emissions from the net economic benefits, certainly those parties could, as I understand it, Mr. Sarah, make their opinions known during a RRR process, which would give us an opportunity to reconsider if they have really compelling reasons why this in particular makes sense for us to have adopted.
I like that. All right. So I guess do you need to see the decision? So it sounds like it's an ABC decision. We're gonna decline to include the emissions benefits, and we'll have some language inviting the parties to clarify or respond, which, as Commissioner Gilman points out, they may do anyway. Do you want this to be ABC or TBC, Commissioner Plant?
ABC is fine with me.
Commissioner Gilman?
I'm fine with ABC just to the extent that on the first point with the BE, we can point out that this is a discrete decision related to DSM plans specifically, and that the determination of BE for clean heat plans and GIP will likely be a different matter.
I'm good with that, Commissioner Plant.
Yep.
Mr. Greenberg, Mr. Sarah, anything else on this one?
Go ahead, Mr. Greenberg.
I just want to be sure you understand that while the decision here is to take the social cost of emissions out of the net economic benefits, we would continue to allow the non-energy benefits not associated with emissions to remain in net economic benefits. So that would be consistent with the current rule 4760F, I think it is.
That's my understanding, Commissioner Plant. Any comments on that?
Yeah.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds like we got ABC decision, and we'll see what we get with RRR. Proceeding number 23A0244E, Black Hills TAP. Mr. Eden, Mr. Gomez.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory staff, and I, along with First Assistant Attorney General Paul Gomez, will be setting up your deliberations on the exceptions that have been filed in Black Hills Transportation Electrification Plan. As background, Black Hills Colorado Electric filed its application for approval of its 2024 through 2026 Transportation Electrification Plan, or TEP, on May 15th, 2023. In addition to Black Hills, the parties to this proceeding are comprised of the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, the Colorado Public Utilities Commission trial staff, Colorado Energy Office, CEO, and Green Latinos, Mothers Out Front, Vote Solar, and Woman X from the Mountain, who collectively refer to themselves as the Environmental Justice Coalition, or EJC. The commission referred this proceeding to an administrative law judge, or ALJ, who set the matter for hearing. Prior to the hearing, however, Black Hills staff and UCA joined a comprehensive settlement agreement. CEO partially joined the settlement agreement, and EJC opposed it. On December 20th, 2023, the ALJ issued decision number R23-0843, the recommended decision. The recommended decision modifies the settlement agreement to reinstate the income qualified, or IQ, EV purchase rebate program. As the name implies, under this program, the company provides rebates to IQ customers to help offset the initial purchase price of a new or used EV. In the settlement agreement, the settling parties had agreed to terminate this program, but CEO and EJC urged the ALJ to keep it. Other than the EV purchase rebate program, the recommended decision largely approves the settlement agreement and its proposed budget. On January 8th, CEO, UCA, and EJC filed exceptions to the recommended decision. Neither Black Hills nor staff filed exceptions. On January 22nd, Black Hills filed a response to EJC's and CEO's exceptions. On the same day, EJC filed a response to UCA's exceptions. With that background in place, unless the commission has any questions or opening discussion, I'll proceed to address the various issues raised in exceptions. I'll plan to start with UCA's exceptions, then CEO's, and then finally EJC's.
No, that makes sense to me. Why don't you go ahead, Mr. Reed?
Thanks. So as I previously mentioned, the settling parties, Black Hills staff and UCA, agreed in the settlement agreement to discontinue the IQ EV purchase rebate program that the commission directed Black Hills to start in the first TBP. CEO and EJC both argued that the EV purchase rebate program should continue. The recommended decision directed a continuation of the IQ EV purchase rebate program at a 3-year budget of $70,000 with a $2,500 rebate for either new or used EVs. In its exceptions, UCA asks that the commission eliminate the program, arguing that it does not minimize costs while maximizing benefits. Noting that only 28 EV purchase rebates could be issued, UCA argues that the program will not significantly improve access to transportation electrification, nor make any significant impact on emissions reductions. Rather, UCA argues that the rebates will only be useful to a small handful of IQ customers, and notes analysis from staff that every $1 spent on IQ EV purchase rebates will cost Black Hills ratepayers $1.20. UCA also asserts that the utility EV purchase rebates are redundant following the enactment of recent federal and state incentives, and notes that the new federal and state incentives arose after the commission's decision in Black Hills' first TEP. Given these new incentives and the uptick in EV adoption, UCA asserts that, quote, the commission's policy implementing the IQ EV purchase rebate from 2021 is inappropriate in today's EV ecosystem, end quote. In EJC's response, EJC urges the commission to reject UCA's exceptions and keep the IQ EV purchase rebate program. EJC asserts that the program will directly address cost concerns for IQ customers and advance equitable vehicle electrification. Regarding UCA's assertion that the EV purchase rebate program is redundant, EJC notes that an IQ customer might not qualify for every federal, state, and utility incentive. EJC further argues that even with the existence of these other incentives, the IQ EV rebate program still makes EVs more affordable for IQ customers. So the decision is whether to eliminate the IQ EV purchase rebate per UCA's exceptions. I have a recommendation, but I'll pause for any questions or discussion.
Commissioner Plant, what would you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would reject the exception and uphold the ALJ decision. I think that, you know, for a variety of reasons, you know, the IQ incentive is something that is appropriate and that we should continue.
Commissioner Goman.
I agree in denying the UCA exception on this point. I'd like to see the program continue, and I will point out it's a fairly modest size. So happy to see how it moves forward in this iteration of the CEP.
I agree with my colleagues and would also like to see this program continue given its relatively modest size. Mr. Eden.
Thank you. So up next, I'll go through CEO's exceptions. The first of which relates to whether Black Hills should be required to implement the EV purchase rebate program and the IQ e-bike pilot as point of sale rebates. Similar to the EV purchase rebate, the e-bike pilot provides rebates to help offset the initial purchase price of an electric bicycle. The recommended decision does not require the company to administer either of these programs as a point of sale rebate. Instead, the recommended decision directs Black Hills to work with CEO to explore whether it can cost effectively administer these programs as point of sale rebates. In its exceptions, CEO argues that the commission should set clear deadlines by which the company must implement these programs using point of sale rebates. A point of sale rebate, CEO asserts, is more effective at increasing adoption and is more beneficial for lower income households or households with lower tax burdens. CEO further states that the point of sale rebate is a key aspect of the e-bike rebate program that CEO administers at a state level. Regarding timeframes, CEO requests that the commission require the company to launch the IQ EV purchase rebate program as a point of sale rebate within 120 days after the effective date of the TEP. CEO also states, however, that 180 days is a reasonable time frame if the commission wishes to provide the company with more flexibility. Turning to the e-bike pilot program, CEO argues that the commission should require a company to commence the pilot with rebates at point of sale within 180 days of the TEP approval. Alternatively, CEO states that if the commission wants to give the company more time, any deadline within 12 months would be reasonable. Black Hills opposes CEO's request. Black Hills states that it wants to offer point of sale rebates if there's a feasible and cost-effective way to do so, and that it will collaborate with CEO to explore a solution. However, the company maintains that implementing a point of sale rebate is administratively burdensome, and outsourcing that work to a third-party administrator is costly. As support, Black Hills states that for the e-bike program and the EV vehicle exchange rebate program that CEO runs, CEO does not self-administer the point of sale rebates, but pays a third party significant money to do so. In its exceptions, CEO also requests additional reporting on these rebate programs, but I'll present those as a separate decision point. Right now, the decision point before you is whether to grant CEO's request to require Black Hills to administer these rebate programs as a point of sale program. I'll pause for any questions, or I can move to my recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I would be inclined to support CEO's exception here. I think that, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's really become the state policy that point of sale is the place for rebates to happen for electric vehicles specifically, but CEO's done on the electric bikes as well. And also federal policy for that matter. I mean, they've changed the way that federal incentives are applied so that they can be transferred to the dealers and can be applied at point of sale. So both state and federal policy have moved to point of sale. We know that, of course, affordability is, a number one barrier for income qualified buyers. And also, I don't buy this administratively burdensome argument from Black Hills when we're talking about 28 EV rebates. It seems like, you know, if a company like Black Hills can't figure out over the course of 4 or 6 months how to get 28 rebates out to a car dealership that, by the way, has an incentive to apply a reduction in cost to a customer. I mean, I don't know what to say. It doesn't seem like it's administratively burdensome. And it, you know, I agree, it probably is not the volume that you would engage a third party to administer. I mean, we're talking about, even with the e-bikes, fewer than 100 rebates. This is something that I think that CEO said, you know, they could apply half an FTE. I don't even think it would take that, quite honestly. So I would be inclined to support the CEO exception.
Commissioner Goman.
I'm a little torn on this one because I'm trying to figure out how you kind of set up this apparatus for, as you pointed out, kind of so few rebates, and kind of is the cart too big for the horse in terms of what you have to do to set it up, you know, in order to do it. And I mean, if we're talking half an FTE, that could be half the cost of the value of the rebates in a year, like, to devote even administratively, like, to this. So I don't know. I certainly agree with you. Like, I think that dealers would have an incentive to be pushing this and like working proactively with Black Hills on this. I just worry a little bit about setting up all this for what I saw as I kind of saw it the opposite way, that there's so few rebates that to some extent, is there too much to do to support so few rebates? So I don't know. I'm more on the fence on this one than you are, but interested to hear more perspective.
Mr. Eden, can you remind me how many utility dollars are at stake, and whether customers are supporting the halftime CEO person, or is that being donated by CEO?
No, so any FTE that is used to administer the point of sale program for Black Hills would be paid for by Black Hill ratepayers. The CEO made clear during the hearing that they didn't think it was appropriate for the state to help administer, you know, some other utilities point of sale program. As for the funds, the IQE bike rebate program has a total budget of 30,000 over 3 years, which will be about 20 rebates per year, so 60 in total. And then the as I mentioned, the IQED purchase rebate for the cars is $70,000 over 3 years, and should be about 28 rebates.
And when you say 30,000, that's cumulative, not a year?
Correct. That's 30,000 over 3 years, 10,000 per year.
And how much is the cost of the FTE, half FTE to manage it?
I think the total administrative budget is 745,000. That includes the half FTE, but obviously that's there's other things in the administrative budget than just that half FTE. I don't have the cost for that half FTE in front of me right now.
Commissioner Plant, you want to jump back in and respond?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that the utility is really making a mountain out of a molehill here. I mean, we're talking about for vehicles, we're talking about 28 rebates, which, you know, you could make a phone call and write a check. I mean, you don't have to have some elaborate rebate system. Yes, CEO, you know, administers millions and millions of dollars of rebates across the state. So they engage a third party rebate processing firm to do all of this sort of thing for them. But we're talking about a handful of rebates. I mean, if you're thinking it's going to take a half-time person, which I personally don't think it takes a half-time person, that's, you know, 1,000 hours a year. That's 3,000 hours over the course of 3 years to write 100 checks. It would take 30 hours each check. I mean, come on, and this is ridiculous. I think, you know, they are kind of making an issue out of something that they don't need to make an issue out of here.
I feel like I am being shamed into supporting this by Commissioner Plant. So I'm gonna support Commissioner Plant. I don't and Commissioner Gumman, where are you at?
That was some cold hard math, but yeah, I think the way you framed it is helpful in that, like, this does not have to be of the same kind of scale and structure that public service does. That's not really the expectation. I mean, truth be told, there are only so many car dealerships and only so many bike dealerships, or I don't know what they're called, bike shops, within Black Hills service territory. I think it's a pretty discrete number. So it would certainly be my hope that they could come up with a very concise, kind of easy process dealing with a very discrete number of parties that they're dealing with here. So to that extent, I can support you on that. I mean, I certainly buy and recognize that this breaks down a massive barrier, especially since these rebates are targeted for IQ customers. You know, floating more than $1,000 is pretty difficult, right? And so I certainly, you've won me over, and I support you in that. I certainly hope they can find a much easier process than kind of what they've at first assumed had to happen. And I think the benefit is significant in improving access.
All right. I think the next two exceptions from CEO requiring status reports filing and an amended TEP, Mr. Eden are opposed. So let me just take a quick vote. Are you all right with those two exceptions, Commissioner Plant?
Yes, I am.
Are you okay granting those two exceptions, Commissioner Gilman, that are unopposed by Black Hills?
Yeah, I didn't hear the first time. Unopposed.
Unopposed.
Yeah, yes, I do support those two additional exceptions by CEO that are not opposed.
If that gives you what you need, you want to go to the EJC exceptions, Mr. Eden?
That's fine for those last two unopposed ones, but going back to the point of sale issue briefly, in CEO's exceptions, they ask both for, to implement a point of sale requirement and that there be a specific deadline, which the company needs to start doing that by. And specifically for the EVs, the CEO asked that the deadline be set between 120 days, or if the commission wants more flexibility, 180 days after a final commission decision. And there's 18 months for the e-bike pilot, or 12 months if the commission wants to give more flexibility. So I'm curious if the commission has a decision in terms of the timelines that the company needs to implement this point of sale program by.
Commissioner Plant, what would you like to do?
I'd say the 180 days should be plenty of time.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
As do I. Does that give you what you need, or is there one other issue there?
Just to be clear, the 180 days both for the EV purchase rebate and for the e-bike pilot, or would it be different for those two programs?
I think for both.
Okay.
Commissioner Gumman?
Yes, I agree.
As do I.
Okay, that gives me what I need there. So with that, I'll turn now to EJC's exceptions. The first of which is direct payments for community-based organizations, or CBOs. The recommended decision rejects EJC's request that Black Hills allocate an additional $300,000 over the course of the TEP, $100,000 per year, to directly compensate CBOs as part of the customer communication plan. However, the recommended decision does encourage the company to leverage the approved TEP budget to partner with CBOs including compensating them for their efforts. In its exceptions, EJC maintains that the Commission should require Black Hills to fund CBOs with an additional $300,000 to conduct outreach and education. EJC argues that there is sufficient evidentiary support for direct CBO funding, that CBO-led outreach is a recognized best practice, and that the Commission should not reject EJC's CBO proposal for lack of metrics or parameters when the company's own proposal suffers from the same flaw. EJC similarly dismisses the point that the settlement agreement allows Black Hills to compensate CBOs, arguing that this type of compensation is not a substitute for outreach and education that CBOs directly conduct. Finally, EJC argues that the recommended decision ignores a relevant statutory factor in Section 40-5-1072G. EJC asserts that the recommended decision exclusively analyzes whether the proposal minimizes the overall cost and maximizes the overall benefits, but fails to consider whether the TEP will provide access for low-income customers for subsection 1072G. Black Hills opposes EJC's request and cites staff's testimony that $300,000 for CBOs would essentially be a blank check. Black Hills further argues that there is no record evidence that dedicated funding for CBOs will yield results commensurate with the amount of funding being dedicated. I'll pause here for any questions or discussion, or I can proceed to a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree with the ALJ on this one, and not with the exception. I think I think that Black Hills should be working more closely with the CBOs in their outreach and beyond, simply event sponsorships and things like that. Those are, to me, can be seen more as PR than they are actual communications and outreach. And I think that they should make more of an effort to work through those organizations in their outreach. But I would vote to reject the exception.
Commissioner Goman?
Yeah, I tend to agree in rejecting or denying the exception. However, I will say their outreach budget has $190,000 over the 3 years for community events and sponsorships, as Commissioner Plant kind of indicated broadly. And so I would recommend that we encourage Black Hills to use $100,000 of that budget over the 3 years to fund partnerships with CBOs. As Commissioner Plant stated, sometimes these sponsorships come off as a bit more of a PR move than like actual straight education to the community. And so I would really like to see the focus of that community events and sponsorships be in very large part partnering with CBOs to really test out. And then I think we get to the next TEP and we have a lot more information about really what benefits we're seeing from these sorts of direct partnerships, but that really necessitates them focusing on it to a large degree. So I'd encourage we have them encourage them to use $100,000 over the 3 years of that community events and sponsorships bucket for CBO partnerships, and then require the company to expressly address whether it's on track to meet that expectation in its annual TEP filing, so we can really kind of keep track of what they're doing, especially as it relates to support and partnership with CBOs. And I think that will provide us really important information as we move to the next TEP to understand the value here and really how we ensure we're leveraging CBOs to the greatest extent possible.
In your statement, Commissioner Goman, you used the word recommend and then encourage instead of picking an exact percentage. Are you all right if we continue with the encourage language so there's some flexibility?
Yeah, I think encourage, but I think we should be clear that we're encouraging them to hit right around that $100,000 mark. over the 3 years. And then in the annual reporting, we can really understand to what degree they are fulfilling that, and be able to assess it better.
All right. Strongly encourage
Strongly encourage with tracking.
with tracking. Commissioner Plant, you okay? So we're going to deny the exceptions and strongly encourage with tracking. Does that work for you?
Yes, it does. Commissioner Gilman's trust but verify proposal.
Yeah, with maybe not too much, with some flexibility. You want to keep going, Mr. Eden?
Yes, thank you. EJC argues that the commission should adopt a dedicated electric school bus program with a $600,000 total budget. EJC argues that in rejecting its electric bus proposal, the recommended decision solely focuses on the cost impacts while ignoring other statutory considerations, including contributions to improving air quality. EJC goes on to argue that new federal government programs that provide assistance for electric school buses demand a robust utility program that complements and maximizes the use of federal incentives. Finally, EJC asserts that the company failed to comply with the Commission's first TEP decision, which requires the company to implement a mass transit rebate program and an electric bus pilot program. Black Hills opposes EJC's request, arguing that the fleet electrification plan in the settlement agreement offers a better approach in which the company would conduct outreach regarding the benefits of fleet electrification and the available rebates and tax credits, and would provide assistance to school districts and public transit agencies in obtaining those federal funds. Black Hills also asserts that the benefits the recommended decision discusses implicitly include improvements to air quality. I have a recommendation on this point, but I'll stop here for any questions or your discussion.
Commissioner Plant, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the settlement agreement really hit on the sweet spot here. There's a lot of money in the federal IRA, you know, for specifically this purpose, and you know, the Black Hills territory is, you know, prime candidacy for those grants, and I think what they really do need is you know, assistance and aid in getting those grant applications in and in correctly. So I think that they have a good solution there, and I would vote to reject the exception.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yes, I tend to agree. I have one thought from the previous one. Sorry to take us out of order, but I also want to recognize there is some budget flexibility, you know, between different areas of the budget. So to the extent that the company is finding partnering with CBOs to be incredibly beneficial as they go, I think there is some flexibility there to even grow in that area as they go. Now back to this one.
Duly noted.
That way, you know, we can grow. Like, if it's going really well, we don't want to stand in the way of that going really well. But I agree with Commissioner Plant on this one. I certainly expect the utility to be very helpful to the school districts and other kind of community-based organizations looking for grants for electrified school buses. And, you know, I really find that I think proactive help in this area can kind of make or break in terms of being very helpful in understanding the impacts to the grid, the sorts of rates, and these sorts of things for the school districts or other folks deploying the buses, so that they can really be a helpful partner. And so that would certainly be my expectation here, but I would agree with Commissioner Plant to deny the exception.
Yeah, as do I. I start to worry about non-participant rate impacts, you know, when we start getting into these dollars, given the current rates in this community. I'd also deny the exception. Keep going, Mr. Eden.
One clarifying point on this last issue, EJC raises the argument that there's a directive from the first TEP that Black Hills implement a mass transit and bus program in this TEP, and advisors would recommend that, just for clarity, that the commission waive that directive from the inaugural TEP and stick with the recommended decision.
Any comments on that, Commissioner Plant?
No, I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goodman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. Regarding the next argument that EJC raises in exceptions, the settlement agreement establishes certain residential rebates to help customers offset the cost of installing an EV level 2 charger. There's a $500 rebate and then an enhanced $1,300 rebate for IQ customers. All of the settling parties, as well as CEO, support these rebates, and the recommended decision approves them. In its exceptions, EJC argues that the Commission should fully allocate residential charging rebates to IQ customers so that Black Hills can begin to address the additional cost barriers and needs of IQ customers. EJC argues that the recommended decision fails to consider the evidence showing the need for dedicated IQ charger rebates and fails to properly consider the need to focus on IQ customers. Black Hills opposes the request, arguing that the goal of widespread EV adoption includes all customers, including those with low and moderate incomes. The company argues that EJC's proposal would exclude moderate income and other customers from one of the most important aspects of the TEP, which is residential charging infrastructure rebates. I'll stop here for any questions or discussion, but I also have a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant,
Yeah, I would vote to reject the exception.
Commissioner Goodman,
Yeah, I also would. I think as we look at a kind of a more mature market in the years to come, I think that's an appropriate adjustment to be considered in the next kind of iterations of the TEP to understand if even kind of moderate income customers need the support to help promote this. At the point we are right now, I think it's appropriate to consider to continue to include that. And I think there's an appropriate differentiation between kind of the non-IQ and the IQ levels of the rebate to ensure that there is an emphasis on providing benefits to IQ customers at a higher level than other customers. But I think the benefits of ensuring there are more EVs being deployed, especially within the communities, folks can see them, they have immediate impacts on local air quality. I think those are all helpful, and at this point in the process, helpful to continue to include some level of non-IQ rebates, but certainly something we should consider as this all matures in the future.
I agree. It just feels premature to go down this path right now. So I would also vote to reject the exception. Keep going, Mr. Eden.
Thank you. EJC argues that the Commission should increase the total TEP budget to $3.8 million. EJC asserts that if the Commission approves EJC's proposals and its $3.8 million budget, the average residential customer's monthly bill would only increase an additional 3 cents to 7 cents per month compared to the settlement agreement. EJC protests that the recommended decision does not rigorously evaluate whether the proposed budget fulfills the equity mandates of Section 40-5-107 and instead focuses on minimizing the TEP's rate impact. Black Hills characterizes EJC's arguments regarding the rate impacts of its proposed $3.8 million budget as a no big deal argument and warns that the aggregate effect of this argument across all of the programs presented to the Commission would be substantial. Black Hills goes on to state that EJC ignores how the settlement agreement adopts EJC's position that no budget be shifted away from IQ or DI programs, and also requires that the company not shift more than 50% of the budget between programs. I'll stop here unless you would like a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I would vote to reject the exception.
Commissioner Goodman.
I also agree to reject.
Yeah, as do I. I'm just given where rates are at in this community, just really concerned about non-participant rate impacts, and saying no big deal to spending doesn't feel right to me. So I would also vote to deny the exception.
Thank you, Commissioners. There's just one more decision point left to address, which Mr. Gomez will present. So I'll turn it over to him now.
Mr. Gomez.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. EJC requests that the Commission should proactively require the company to broaden its equity program eligibility by following any eligibility criteria the Commission adopts in public service companies pending TEP proceeding in 23A-0242E. Because a decision has not yet issued in the PSCO TEP proceeding, EJC recommends that Black Hills be required to update its equity program qualification criteria within 60 days of the Commission's final decision in that public service proceeding, so that Black Hills equity eligibility criteria are consistent with public service equity eligibility criteria. Black Hills, on the other hand, counters that the EJC proposal is legally improper. Black Hills argues that to require whatever is decided in the PSCO TEP proceeding apply to Black Hills TEP violates the due process rights of not only Black Hills, but every party to this proceeding. Black Hills states the evidentiary record in the PSCO TEP proceeding has not been adopted or administratively noticed in the Black Hills TEP proceeding. Consequently, no party in this proceeding has had the opportunity to consider and respond to whatever eligibility proposals have been made in the PSCO TEP proceeding. Unless you have any questions, I'm ready for my recommendation.
Yeah, I don't know about Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, but it does sound like significant due process concerns. So I would welcome your recommendation, Mr. Gomez.
Okay. Well, you spoil the ending, but I would recommend that denying EJC's request and its exceptions. I agree with the company that EJC's proposal could very well violate the company's and all other parties to this proceedings due process rights. The fundamental requirement of due process is the opportunity for notice and to be heard at a meaningful time and in a meaningful manner. By requiring Black Hills to adhere to a commission decision in another proceeding involving another utility after the decision has been issued and the appeal process has run with no opportunity to participate in any meaningful fashion would deprive Black Hills of its due process rights.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gellman.
I also agree.
Those do I. I think, thank you, Mr. Gomez. I think, Mr. Eden, that concludes the exceptions. Commissioner Plant, are you okay with an ABC order on this?
Yes, I am.
Commissioner Gellman.
Yes.
As am I. Does that give you what you need to draft an order, Mr. Eden?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Continuing to proceeding number 24A-0038E. Mr. Lemaire, gas price volatility mitigation plan for public service, and you may want to take 003E and 0038E and G together if you'd like. Up to you, Mr. Lemaire.
Yeah, sure. I'll take them separately and just try to avoid repetition. But good morning, commissioners. My name is Patrick Lemaire with your Economics and Financial Analysis section. I'm here to present Public Service Company of Colorado's gas price volatility mitigation plans for both the electric and gas departments. These plans are generally referred to as GPVM plans or simply just hedging plans. And I'll discuss the electric department plan first, so 24A-0038E as it's referenced on the CWM agenda. On January 16, 2024, Public Service filed an application for approval of the electric department's hedging plan for the period of May 1st, 2024 through April 30th, 2025. Concurrent with its application, Public Service filed a motion for variance from decision number C03-0670 and GPVM procedures in proceeding number 02S-315EG. No parties intervened in this proceeding. The annual hedging plan is filed with the Commission with the goal to reduce exposure of public services electric sales customers to fluctuations in the price of gas used to generate electricity and to mitigate price risk at a reasonable cost to electric customers. Public Service does not make any money on the hedging plans, but passes the costs or benefits on to its ratepayers. The hedging plan includes 4 components: the proposed quantity of gas to be hedged, the timing of the hedges, the annual hedging budget, and the not to exceed amount of hedging costs that the company may incur before being subject to incremental prudence risk. Traditionally, Public Service uses 2 hedging mechanisms during the winter heating season to mitigate the impact of price increases on its base load and spot market natural gas purchase. The first hedge is financial. Public Service executes a financial instrument that treats some of its baseload purchases as if they were purchased at a predetermined price, affording some protection against extended price increases. The second hedge is a physical storage. The company purchases gas, usually at a time of lower gas prices, so during the summer when demand is low, and then stores the gas underground for later use. The proposed plan for 2024 through 2025 includes 2 pieces: a seasonal strategy and a long-term strategy. The combined volume available to be hedged under the 2 components is a maximum of 50% of the monthly forecast purchase volumes. Unique to this year's plan is the proposed incorporation of a fixed price purchase. The company notes that due to current volatility in the gas commodity marketplace, the cost of using traditional financial hedging methodologies has increased significantly. Thus, the opportunity to enter into a limited number of short-term fixed price purchases provides another tool for the company to utilize in order to pass through lower cost gas purchases to its customers. In this proceeding, the motion for variance specifically requests that the Commission grant 1, temporary and partial variance from the 15 million budget cap established by the initial settlement agreement, and 2, the GPVM procedures established by the initial settlement agreement in order to suspend additional financial hedging purchases after the hedging dollar budget is met, or if the company makes a determination that the financial hedge prices are high. In summary, the requested variance will allow Public Service to reduce the overall hedging budget, target the central winter months of December to February when gas has been historically high, and provide the company more flexibility to manage hedge volumes and hedging instruments. I will pause here for questions, or I'm prepared to make a recommendation regarding both the application and the motion for variance for the electric hedging plan.
If you can make your recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Staff finds the proposed GPVM plan to be true and accurate and consistent with the Commission's rules and procedures. Staff believes that as proposed, the plan offers a diverse set of tools for the company to employ in order to combat gas prices during the winter months. Further, staff finds the company's motion for variance in this proceeding to be in good faith and necessary towards implementation of the proposed GPVM plan. Thus, taken together, staff recommends the Commission approve the Public Services 2024 through 2025 annual gas price volatility mitigation plan for its electric department, and further recommends the Commission approve the requested motion for variance from the GPVM procedures approved in proceeding number O2S-315EG.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision granting the application as well as the waiver request. So if you want to go to the gas hedging thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Again, my name is Patrick Lemaire, and before you today is
Still Patrick Lemaire.
Still Patrick. Before you today is Public Service Company of Colorado's gas price volatility mitigation plan for its gas department for the period of July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. Again, filed on January 16th, 2024. And concurrent with this application was a motion for variance from decision number C210764 and proceeding number 21A075G. No parties filed petition to intervene in this proceeding. The gas hedging plan mirrors that of the electric department hedging plan in terms of process. Its 4 components, including both the financial and physical hedging pieces. Thus, to avoid repetition, I'll just provide some unique background on the gas hedging plan. First established in 2004, the company received approval of 3-year master GPVMs, which include overall procedures and seasonal and long-term hedging strategies of the company. This annual filing, such as this application, provides the updated hedging volumes and timing and the associated budget. The gas department hedging plan has historically had a larger overall budget and in turn hedging volume compared to the electric hedging plan. and has primarily relied on the money call options for its financial hedging component, such is true for this year. By June 1st of every year, Public Service files a report detailing the results of the previous heating season's gas hedging plans with the costs and benefits of the program and the outlook for the following season. The companies would report on the plan before you today by June 1st, 2024. So again, I will pause here for questions, or I'm prepared to make a recommendation regarding both the application and the motion for variance.
Nope, if you can make your recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. For reasons already outlined in the electric hedging plan, staff finds the company's motion for variance in this proceeding to be in good faith and necessary towards implementation of the hedging plan. Thus, taken together, staff recommends the Commission approve Public Services 2024 through 2025 annual gas price volatility mitigation plan for its gas department, and further recommends the Commission approve the requested motion for variance from the GPVN procedures approved in decision number C210764.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
Also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision granting the application. And thank you, Mr. Lemaire.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 24D-0046EG, staff requests for a declaratory order. Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Erin McLaughlin, Commission Counsel. Before you today is whether to accept a petition for declaratory order filed by staff of the Commission. By way of background, Senate Bill 23-291, which was effective August 7th of 2023, revised significant portions of Title 40. Through temporary rules enacted just after the bill became effective, the Commission began implementation of the Senate bill on a prospective basis, including through updated compliance reporting. The Commission further indicated that it would bring forward a rulemaking to fully implement the bill. In addition, adjudications and advice letter filings are already underway to enable utility-specific implementation. Updates provided in 40-3-114 sub 2 include prohibitions on utilities from recovering certain costs such as lobbying, political, and advertising expenses from ratepayers, whether through proposed base rates, riders, or other charges. While it takes no position itself, on January 23rd, staff filed a request for a declaratory order claiming that there could be two interpretations of the statute. Staff's pleading requests that the Commission, through a declaratory order proceeding, take up whether the statute could be read for all utilities as either of the following. First, a future prohibition, which based on the plain reading, provides prospective nature of the statutes and concerns about unconstitutional retrospective legislation. Staff states that the reasonable plain language interpretation of the statute is that it applies to cost recovery proposed after the effective date of the bill. The second interpretation is for immediate prohibition, where staff claims that a plausible argument exists that an interpretation of future application alone could be contrary to the actual or presumed intent of the General Assembly. Therefore, staff claims that an alternate reading that immediately prohibits all recovery after August 7th of even previously approved amounts could be argued as reasonable. Staff does not provide any specific information or amounts under now prohibited costs, but even does point out itself that the Commission did not historically allow costs listed in statute to be recovered in past cases. Under Rule 1304, the Commission has discretion to entertain a petition for declaratory order to terminate a controversy or remove an uncertainty regarding any tariff, statute, or Commission rule, regulation, or order. I am prepared to make a recommendation on whether to accept staff's petition if that's acceptable.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So here, Commissioners, staff provides that under the longstanding constitutional, statutory, and case law principles, statutes are prospective in nature. Colorado law is also clear in its prohibition on both retroactive legislation and rate making. Also, and as staff points out, the plain language of the statute underscores the prospective nature of statutes at issue. With that plain language, the Commission does not necessarily reach any canons of construction that consider implicit intent that would be needed for an alternative interpretation. Staff also points out where the legislature intended immediate changes to rate recovery. It did include explicit language and required tariff filings, which it did not in these sections of the statute. In addition, it is noteworthy, as staff pointed out in its filing, that historically, the Commission has not generally approved any of the listed items prohibited officially now in rates by statute. Especially with that recognition, staff's filing does not provide any specific factual concerns or rate issues that could substantially affect customer bills. Legally and factually, staff's pleading simply presents no clear controversy. The plain language of the statute and long-standing principles of law prohibiting retroactive application of statutes are clear. Consistent with the Commission issuing temporary rules, broader implications of 291 will be fully addressed in future rulemaking for general applicability. And implementation for specific utilities is and will be ongoing in litigated rate cases filed by those utilities. Your order today can continue to encourage testimony and factual information in those litigated proceedings from all parties, including staff, for ongoing and prospective implementation on rates. So with that, and in these circumstances, analyzing the statutes, those longstanding precedents, and filing considerations, we do recommend that in these circumstances, the Commission issue an order that does not accept the declaratory order and provides a decision with an explanation consistent with that recommendation today.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks. I agree with the recommendation and would point out, of course, this is an issue of a lot of interest as we move forward, especially with our temporary rules and as we move into a full NOPR on it. And I think we'll all be expending a lot of effort in the future with regard to ensuring that we have those rules right around implementation of 291, and also to ensure that we have all of our stakeholders helping us ensure that the rules are enforceable as they're written, because I think some of that will be quite tricky, and so that will be, I think, a very appropriate place for these efforts to take place as we move forward.
I agree as well with your recommendation, and I think that can be an ABC decision declining to accept the petition for a declaratory order as you suggest. So thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Greatly appreciated. Let's go to the last item on the proposed amendments to the gas pipeline safety rules, and then we'll come back and talk about virtual power plants. Dr. Fishaber and Ms. McLaughlin.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Pam Fishaber, is the Deputy Director of the Public Safety Sections. Today, staff is recommending that the Commission issue a notice of proposed rulemaking and refer a matter to hearing for the ALJ for the promulgation of rules that will incorporate changes required by House Bills 23-1216, which was effective on June 7th of 2023, to provide customer service notice and obligations regarding customer-owned utility and gas meter responsibilities. Second, removing references and changing the name from the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission, consistent with what is required as part of Senate Bill 23-285. And then finally, updating narrow references to the inclusion of our recent addition of 49 USC 60106 certification to the pipeline safety program. These changes are prescriptive by statute and are following longstanding utility obligations and tariffs in terms of how customer service lines are defined. We do not expect that these changes will be controversial. The rule changes are not going to overlap the current rulemaking that is going on, 22R 0491 GPS, which is part of the Senate Bill 21108, finding amounts and related updates. That RRR is due on February 20th of 2024. And it's also including our ongoing, is not going to be including the ongoing stakeholder efforts regarding the advanced leak detection technology. Under House Bill 23-1216, the rulemaking is narrow statutory updates, and we have to begin this no later than March 1st, 2024, which is why we are breaking this out as a separate rulemaking. In terms of what is required, there will be information in there regarding installation and reinstallation of service regulators, visual inspection of gas meters, written notices to customers, and then some minor changes to definitions. In addition, the bill does require that the commission establish process for determining whether an owner or operator or a customer is responsible for service lines installed before March 1st of 2024, but after August 14th of 1995. Those proposed rules follow longstanding tariff inclusions and define what the customer-owned service line is as a portion of that line extending downstream from the gas meter. For just a brief and summary, we've made a few changes to definitions under 11001. We've updated our incorporations by reference under 11008. And then we've added the new definitions from House Bill 1216 under Section 11205 and outlined the customer-owned service line requirements per the statute under new Section 11206. Unless you have any questions, I've made the recommendation, so I'll turn it over to you for discussion.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC order. Dr. Fishaber opening the proceeding, issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking, and referring it to NALJ. Does that give you what you need? Sounds like
it
yes.
Absolutely does. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceeding 23M-0466 EG, Mr. Davis, Ms. Dundas, and as I understand it, Mr. Davis, given the timing of this, we're not going to vote today, but just engage in an initial conversation. I know I have some questions for Commissioner Plant, and then we'll bring it back for a vote next week. So with that understanding, can you get us started?
Sure. Again, good morning, commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. In September of last year, following the conclusion of Public Service Company of Colorado's application proceeding on strategic issues surrounding the company's demand-side management and beneficial electrification plans, the Commission opened this docket to explore third-party implementation of certain pilot programs in the utilities, electric, and natural gas service areas. The proceeding was intended to facilitate the development and implementation of requests for proposals or pilots, one on virtual power plants or VPPs, one for natural gas demand response, and the third for neighborhood electrification. The main objectives of the proceeding included, first, identifying the core objectives and timelines for the pilots, two, setting the main technical cost and time parameters for the RFPs, three, establishing milestones for the RFPs, and four, setting operational and reporting milestones for the pilots. The Commission further designated Commissioner Plant as the hearing commissioner, and Commissioner Plant issued decision number R24009 on January 5th. On January 25th, Public Service Company of Colorado and the Colorado Solar and Storage Association with the Solar Energy Industries Association, and further joined by Advanced Energy United, filed exceptions to that recommended decision. No responses to those exceptions were subsequently filed. With that set up, I'll ask you for guidance as how you'd like to proceed now. For example, I could summarize the two exceptions pleadings, or I can list the decision points that stem from those pleadings. Commissioner Plant may also want to discuss his decision as the starting point for your discussion this morning.
Well, I'll just start off by thanking Commissioner Plant for leading this forward. It seems like it's going to be critical to sort of dynamically manage supply and demand as we continue to integrate growing amounts of renewables. And it seems like you've moved us way down the road on this conversation and generated some excitement. So greatly appreciated. And I got some questions for you, but turn it over to you and take us where you go, and anything you'd like to say, and then I'll ask my questions and then turn it over to Commissioner Gilman. So Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, that's it. That sounds great. And thanks for the opportunity to just kind of introduce some of the thoughts that I had around both the decision and the process and some of the exceptions or the issues that were brought up with the exceptions that were filed, just to give some context as you all are considering this over the next week. So I just want to give you a quick overview, also to say that you guys are really smart, and I never get to talk to you about this stuff unless you're in this venue. So I really wanted to. I've been sitting in my little cave by myself thinking about this stuff and going, God, I wonder what those guys think about this. So
in my case, sometimes smarter than other times. So
so I really wanted to open that up. First of all, I want to say that, one of the things that's really encouraging is that the company, is I think on board with all the things that we want to do here. And they've indicated that as much in their comments and with the plans that they've brought forward. I think they have a really great team, dealing with this. So I think they acknowledge and recognize that it's a key part of any resource mix going forward, that we have this capability. The decision was written with a recognition that the VPP should be able to manage demand, both for matching supply to demand and reducing peak loads on the bulk system, but also maximizing the efficiency of operations within the distribution system. The company in their comments points out that they think it should be done in a couple of phases, because management of the distribution system has a number of different challenges that'll take some time. And so they suggest starting with the services to the bulk system, and then a separate process for the, getting into more of the specific distribution system stuff. And for the record, I agree with that recommendation. The DERMS is the critical software interface to send and receive signals between the utility and an aggregator or a customer. And the company proposes that the two phases of implementation, they refer to the first as aggregator DERMS and the second as bulk DERMS. Frankly, I find these terms to be somewhat confusing, because aggregator DERMS are going to impact the bulk system, and bulk DERMS would involve aggregators. So I'm just going to refer to them as phase 1 and phase 2 DERMS, because they're really progressions of DERMS capabilities. So phase 1 would focus on sending signals for events that are triggered from the bulk system, and that might include your typical peak load reduction or load shaping, but also load shifting that might be used to address curtailments when supply is greater than demand, or reliability when demand is greater than variable supply, mitigating the need to use a gas CT, for example. Phase 2 would focus on many of the things Commissioner Gilman's hearing about in her docket on barriers to be capacity constraints at the feeder level, for example, or the demand at the distribution level we heard about in Denver Metro system, that was driving some of the high costs that we heard about in the ERP proceeding. I mean, this phase 2 would contain signals at the distribution level, and the reason that that's a little bit more complicated is that it requires an additional level of communication between distribution level monitoring and managing devices like an ADMS and SCADA system with the DERMS. But I would also say that, focusing on phase 1 first, particularly within a pilot program, addresses some major components that will be needed in phase 2 as well. So the communication protocols between the aggregators and the utility, the M&V systems for tracking events and participation, performance-based payment processes, all these things will be a component of both phase 1 and phase 2. And the pilot in phase 1 will prepare the company for the full deployment of the DERMS in phase 2 and give some experience and understanding of how those things should be structured and incorporated into the DERMS system. The company maintains that the implementation of the full DERMS will take at least 18 months, and that may be the case. I would propose, though, that implementation of phase 1 DERMS should still be targeted for this fall. October is the time frame in the decision, and we heard from the participants in the workshop that was a reasonable time frame. Everybody seemed to think that was reasonable for that phase 1 type of an application. That'll allow for enrollment from aggregators, working out some of the kinks in the DERMS prior to the summer months of 2025, and allow for an informed proposal of how much DR might be attributable to this kind of a system for the 2025 DR, DSM, and beneficial electrification strategic issues proceeding that's going to be filed in late 2025. The company had indicated that they would be considering, submission for the full DERMS within a litigated proceeding in the next DSP. That would, I think right now is scheduled for November of 2024. And that could include the process for the full implementation of the VPP, including the phase 2 DERMS component. And that would be a litigated proceeding, be more comprehensively address a number of the components of the process and the rollout of that full VPP. And the way I'm thinking about it is, if there was a filing with that DSP wouldn't be concluded until maybe the late summer of 2025, not implemented until sometime in 2026, which might align with the 2026 plan filing for DR, DSM, and BE. So it might actually work with the schedule in that way. Finally, because this MDOC was not a litigated proceeding, cost recovery wasn't contemplated, but we could think about whether we can provide direction on that, whether it would be a regulated asset or incorporated into some sort of a rider. I don't know if they can, if we thought DSMCA was an appropriate mechanism, which the company has indicated they would like. I don't know if that can then be incorporated through the ALJ process in the current DSM plan proceeding. You guys are going to know that better than I do. But phase 2 and full BP deployment, they indicate would be in the tens of millions of dollars, as opposed to this sort of phase 1, which is more in the millions range. And so, that's more appropriately addressed in a separate litigated proceeding. I also wanted to clarify something that I think was a little bit confusing, particularly to the COSA, SIA, and AEU exceptions that were filed. And it has to do with the prosumer tariff that mentioned last week, would sort of follows on some of the conversations we've been having. So for participating in the VPP, the presumption is that for the vast majority of participants in the VPP, they would participate within their current existing tariff, TOU, standard tariff. They'd be able to opt out of events, would receive performance payments for participating in events, and that's going to be most of your participants in the VPP. The prosumer tariff that I proposed, I was thinking of prosumers, and this is where it gets sort of confusing, because the term prosumer some entities think of that as being anybody who participates in a VPP. They are a prosumer. I was not taking that approach here. I was trying to distinguish between simple participation in the VPP with, maybe a heat pump or heat pump water heater or a battery system or an EV or whatever it might be, and a customer who met a certain threshold of capacities. They could get onto something that I'm proposing as a sort of a financially beneficial prosumer tariff. And this would be something not for somebody who just maybe has a heat pump or a battery that's enrolled in the system, but maybe somebody has 2 EVs and a heat pump and a battery. And, so they're reaching a certain capacity level that they can provide as a service to the system. And in recognition of their ability to provide that kind of capacity to the system, they would get a beneficial rate. It could almost be thought of as kind of a a capacity payment that you see in an organized market. If you have this capacity available for the utility to draw from in times when it's needed, then we're going to give you this advantageous rate, which I think could also incent people to maybe in order to get onto that rate, you'd have to qualify with a certain level of capacity. And so maybe that would incent people to maybe add that other thing that would increase their capacity and enable them to get into that advantageous tariff. The idea of that, similar to, a capacity payment sort of an arrangement, is that if you're in that tariff, then you don't have the ability to opt out of events. And that would enable, as we're getting to a much more sort of mature VPP, where you get what, is sort of referred to as shimmying of capacity onto the distribution system in order to address the management of maybe charging within a feeder, or providing ancillary services, or trying to accommodate higher capacities within existing infrastructure. That kind of dynamic control that may be more frequent but shorter from the utility would be something that, as a non-opt-out customer, but with a lot of capacity resource available, you would be a real good the prosumer tariff would enable a really good mechanism for doing that, and provide a certain level of certainty to the utility that capacity is available. Again, this is, sort of looking forward to a time when we have a pretty high resolution of people who are, electrifying on the distribution system. We have a much more mature management of the distribution system, VPP, and so that's kind of what we're looking forward to in sort of an exploration of that kind of a tariff. I would say that one of the things that I mentioned in the decision is that kind of a thing would be done within the context of some parameters. So, for example, you can use the battery, but you have to leave at least 40% charge, or you can use the EV, but you have to leave it at least 70 or something like that. You can't adjust the temperature more than 2 or 3 degrees, whatever those parameters might be, in order to maintain sort of the value for the customer who's made this investment, but also provide that capacity to the utility. That's what the prosumer tariff was intended for. And I think that as you're reading the exceptions from COSA-C and AEU, they assumed that was applying to anybody who participated in the VPP, and that was not the intention of that. So that's kind of where everything is. And on the gas DSM, or the gas DR component of this, one of the things that the company indicated was that they agree with the objectives of the gas DR. They think they can get it in place and operating by this winter, which of course is, sort of the target time frame for doing that. But they didn't, if they were waiting for the decision, they may not have enough time. So I would just say, go forth, prosper, do it. And that's those are just my initial comments on all this, and happy to try and answer any questions or just hear the thoughts that you guys have on this whole thing.
Yeah, let me start out with some questions, and again, just say appreciate how far you've driven this down the road from where we were some months ago. So greatly appreciate it. So I also appreciate your distinguishing between grid and aggregator terms and sharing your confusion. I wasn't quite clear on that, but I was clear about the difference between millions and tens of millions. But the company says that the phase one DERM would not optimize the distribution system, nor will it be integrated with the SCADA. But you seem to say it would be integrated at least on the transmission side with the generation. But when they say it's not integrated with the SCADA, that means it's not integrated with the sort of distribution system generation. Is that the right intuition?
Yeah, I think you can kind of think of it as where the signal is coming from. So, you're delivering a sort of a signal to the aggregators and for an event that's based on sort of your grid level bulk system needs. So maybe you've got real high wind generation, but you don't have sufficient demand on the bulk system. You could say, okay, we want to send out a signal to aggregators to, do some charging or, whatever it might be in order to increase the demand, reduce the number of curtailments. That's separate from having communication on the distribution system through the ADMS and the SCADA to the DERMS to say, this feeder is reaching capacity. We need to manage the things that are on this specific area. And that's the part that what the company is saying is that's a much more sort of advanced level of communication that needs to be established between those systems in order to be able to send those kinds of signals. And that's what they're saying. It's going to take them a little bit longer.
Got it. But you see it as sort of a natural progression and evolution, and want to see the rather than being concerned by the limitations of the first phase, you just think it's, as I heard your comments, it's what we need to do to get to the second phase.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing that's still that's the same between the two is you have to have communication from the utility to the aggregators. The aggregators need to be able to respond, communicate back. That it needs to be incorporated into an M&V process as well as a system for establishing performance-based payments. All that's the same, regardless of where the signal's coming from for the event. And so getting those components established, getting aggregators working with them, all that sort of stuff that would be established under phase two would then be able to be implemented, or on phase one, but then be able to be implemented in phase two when we get to that more distribution focused application.
Got it. The COSA, AEU, and CIA ask us for further guidance on issues surrounding customer eligibility, performance, tariffs by customer class, integration with other programs, equitable compensation, quantifying resource value, and some other issues. Just any sense where, how, and when we provide that guidance?
Yeah, a lot of that I kind of left to the utility as they're developing this system, and I think that it's going to be more fleshed out within an actual litigated proceeding where we can build a record more comprehensively. for the purposes of, you know, this sort of a pilot system, you know, and also within this MDocket sort of proceeding. I don't know that we have the kind of information to give, you know, specific guidance on that. I think that what we can do and what I tried to do in the decision and would, you know, welcome all of your involvement is really giving them, you know, sort of a policy guidance of what we want to try and accomplish and to identify what the specific components are that would accomplish those policy objectives.
Got it. I'm still struggling with the tariff and how that would work. I mean, I assume we need at some point an advice letter filing, rate case. And any thoughts on how we appropriately set the level of that tariff? What's the economics behind it? You know, I mean, I'm struggling with how one, you know, somebody who's has two EVs, electric heater, you know, is that person on the same tariff as somebody who's got very little? You know, I'm just struggling with how you think about it, how you set the economics. Any thoughts, guidance on that?
Yeah, and Commissioner Gilman may have other thoughts about this too. What I'm thinking about is that, you know, number one, it would be you would have to qualify for that tariff. So you would have to have a certain level of capacity as a residential customer, a certain level of capacity as a commercial customer in order to even qualify for the tariff. So it wouldn't be available to anybody. It would just be available to those who have this high level of capacity. If you have a high level of capacity, my thinking is you have a high level of capacity, you're going to have high volumetric consumption. So for those customers of an advantageous rate, one that would be financially beneficial to them would be one that shifted the costs more to the fixed expenses and lowered your volumetric cost by a great deal. Obviously not something that we want for all customers. This is just for your high volumetric, high capacity customers. But in exchange for that, then they would need to, you know, not be able to opt out of events and things like that. You know, it's going to take time, as you pointed out, you know, this just establishing that kind of a tariff is going to take some time, but that's okay, I think, because it's also the kind of application that we're looking at, you know, a unique customer base that has high levels of electrification, and is also more integrated with that more advanced DERM system, more advanced VPP application. So I think we have that kind of time. But I was just trying to introduce that concept for the company to think about what might be a structure that would really incentivize people to up their electrification level, because it would be a financially beneficial way of accomplishing their service goals at their home or business, but also provide those kinds of services to the system.
Well, one last thing, and then I'll turn over to Commissioner Gilman. And this may be more of an interim idea, but I was wondering what you thought about including VPPs as part of the next ERP, RFP, and bidding process, sort of along the lines of what I was, you know, proposing for demand response, you know, where we developed in time, you know, or had the company file an RFP, a model contract, and conduct some basic ELCC analysis that would show the capacity value of VPPs. And then as part of the ERP bid package, we would solicit VPP bids. We wouldn't even have to be limited to a pilot. We could add LDs or other performance incentives to the model contract, exactly like the supply bids to ensure that there's incentives for aggregators and customers to show up when we need them. And it just seems like it may be the best way, given that we have a structured litigation coming in 4 months to determine VPP value, gain experience, answer the questions that COSA and AEU are raising, and better understand the economics as a prelude to setting up the tariff. And I think another advantage of that would be that there's a mechanism, an existing litigation to integrate best national practice into what we're doing, work with the parties to get this set up right. And the piece that I just really like is that it puts demand and supply resources on an equal footing in the same process. So I throw it out there for you to think about, for Commissioner Gilman to think about. I would also, so when you have a hammer, and that's what you're familiar with, everything looks like a nail, but that given the process, could we use it, to get some actual bids that would compete with supply side resources and give us real economics on an accelerated way. So I'll throw that out there to you, Commissioner Plant, and I'll stop and then turn it back to Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I look forward to hear what Commissioner Gilman, as a much more experienced commissioner than I am.
I mean,
I think that, first of all, I'd say ultimately that's where we want to get to. Clearly making, the resources that are available through a VPP as a component of an ERP. In terms of applying it to this upcoming ERP, I could imagine that it might be possible to do if we were to focus on, for example, commercial aggregators, because there's already relationships with, large companies, Walmarts, Targets, all these kind of really big consumers that already exists in other markets, generally some more organized markets. And it may be that those relationships through those aggregators are already established. They already have a track record, and they could say, yeah, we can, if we're allowed to aggregate these same customers in Colorado, we could deliver this amount of demand response, to the system. And that's they already have those relationships. And so they'd already know what they would be able to do. And maybe there's a way to do it that way. And also, we're talking about, ultimately the resources that we're considering in the next ERP aren't coming on for a number of years. And by that time, there should be, an operating VPP. So it might fit in well and really get at some of those large capacity opportunities, ahead of time. I think it would be a little harder for, residential aggregators because they aren't operating in the state yet. But for the commercial, I think it might be something that could be contemplated.
I might be a little more optimistic with Nest thermostats or through the EV OEMs that, there's preset aggregation mechanisms already out there. But
No,
with, my apologies to Commissioner Gilman for keeping you waiting. I'll stop now and take it wherever you'd like to go.
Commissioner Gilman, do you have any interest at all in DR? I don't know.
Starting from scratch, so I appreciate you piquing my interest here, Commissioner Point. First of all, I want to say this is so cool. Thank you for your work on this. I'm a little jealous that you got this one, because it's like the exciting, Rah, rah, rah. Let's do something awesome. But you did a great job. I appreciated reading, watching, seeing what was going on in my free time, of course. And really appreciate that. I think you continue to press on the urgency of this development. Yes, things are changing quickly. Yes, there's a lot to do. Yes, it's a little overwhelming. Yes, to all of those. But you can't say keep your foot on the gas anymore, right? So you're like keeping your foot on a high torque electric motor, which is probably actually the exact right analogy here, because I think the acceleration we're going to see will lack the lag you used to see in internal combustion engines. So this is actually a much better comparison anyway. But I think
very geeky analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like we were ready for it. But really, like, I think we are going to see an acceleration here that is really profound in what we can do. I mean, this is the part of this industry that I'm so excited about, because I think the opportunities, especially when you see more beneficial electrification coming, that beneficial electrification is, you know, in very large part, internet connected, highly controllable devices. And really, it absolutely expands our abilities to manage the demand side of the equation in a way that's so exciting. And if you look kind of across proceedings at what we're seeing in the BE barriers proceeding that I'm running, we're seeing some major stresses. You know, I think Monday morning or Monday afternoon, there's expressed about 20% of substation banks on the distribution system are currently, you know, at a situation where they consider them overloaded or at risk of being overloaded. And so, sorry, someone's knocking on my door. It's just UPS and they go away. But
party aggregator.
Hopefully I don't get another knock. But you know, it's and what I'll say about urgency is we're seeing all of these distribution system investments coming and being characterized as incredibly significant upcoming investment needed to, you know, support electrification, to support just in terms of like load growth from population growth and new development that's of a scale that has not been seen in the recent past. Then you have the generation and transmission side. I think we're all aware of the kinds of investments that are being asked for on the generation and transmission side. And so we cannot simply wait for those investments to be made and then go, oh, gee whiz, how could we make this better? How could we use this all better? This has to be baked in. And I know there's a tendency to say, well, if we wait a little, it could be more perfect. It could be better. We could know more. But I think we very much risk over-investing or not planning the systems appropriately if we're not embedding this planning in it. And we just have to keep pushing because this has to be coincident. We can't just over-invest and then think of this afterwards. I don't think that that's an option as far as being good stewards of ratepayers' money. We have to be optimizing from the beginning. It might not be perfect, but we'll use everything we possibly know at that point to make it as good as we can make it as we move forward. So I just wanted to reinforce and appreciate the urgency that you continue to press on ensuring that the next applicable season we can get this going. It might not be perfect, but we need things we can learn from. We need them in our climate. We need them on these systems, and we need to be able to understand what we can do in the next iteration with those. Ideally as efficiently as possible. So just very much agree with much of the sentiment you had in the recommended decision on that urgency to continue to move this forward. You know, and with respect to some of the exceptions we saw, and I think we'll talk about next week in more detail, I think we all have to recognize like this situation where we have to find the right balance. You know, I know Chair's been talking about, you know, are there liquidated damages if the load reductions don't show up? And it's very much a balance between how do we ensure things are predictable and reliable, but not scare everybody away or make them overprice them. And I don't know. We're gonna have to find that balance, and that might feel different in the initial years as everyone's getting comfortable than it will in the out years where we're saying now we can like really definitively avoid investment because we know this is going to show up. We can have maybe more aggressive penalties. So I think we just have to like feel our way through that with the maturity of this so we can ensure that we don't kind of maybe give the market a gut punch before it's ready in terms of how severe those penalties are. We just have to think of it in a really measured way, like how can we begin to get certainty and not scare people away and then transition to a situation that's more stable. Something I think about a lot because I very much want certainty with when this will show up and how much we rely upon it. But I understand we might get a lot of overpricing if we go too hard, too fast with what that looks like in the marketplace. I am very interested in your tariff idea. And I think we'll want to think of that, especially around some of what we were talking about in the phase 2 outcomes too, with regard to should we have like an electric heat rate or perhaps just a rate that works quite well if you have highly controllable electric heat. But I am really a fan of thinking through how we can have kind of voluntary, highly aggressive options for the people who want to take advantage of them. If they're voluntary, I think you can be a lot more aggressive with what you're asking for. I do want to point out maybe some of the discussion on the tariffs with regard to kind of a high level of capacity that's movable. We probably will want to think about kind of equity considerations in that, our lower income consumers will likely have perhaps a smaller footprint, smaller size equipment. So maybe we want to think through all the angles of that. Is it a high percentage of your load that is flexible or controllable rather than like a gross size, which I think would somewhat just tend to a higher income consumer just based on the size of loads, how many cars you have, how big your heating system is. And so just something to consider as we move forward, like if this is a real benefit to some consumers, let's make sure it's accessible but not in a way that compromises kind of the intent. So just something I was thinking as you're talking about kind of gross size. And then with regard to gas demand response, but anyway, I'm very excited about all of this.
Not often you gotta describe a PUC M docket as cool. So
yeah, very cool.
It's a select group that
really, I'm with my people here, so I know you guys are judging me. So with regard to the gas demand response, I was curious. I wasn't seeing the recommended decision, but time is always short, so I always might miss something. Do you have any parameters or set out any guidance, especially if we see the company moving forth before we have a final decision, which my urgency would be on get something in place next winter that is far more robust, far more complicated. And I think, that's what it was. Sorry, hold on one. Can I come back in a second?
Yeah, why don't we, how much do you need? Do you need 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
5 minutes.
Yeah, why don't we come back at
I
11?
realized who was knocking on the door. I'm so sorry.
Let's come back at 11:25. 11:25. We'll take a 7-minute break.
That was abrupt. Sorry.
You're good. Were you able to answer the door in time, or maybe not so much?
They were gone, but they're coming back. I'm very sorry. That was awkward. My husband texted me. I was like, oh yes, oh yes. Okay.
No worries.
Couple more thoughts. Where was I? With respect to gas DR, Commissioner Plant, I was curious. I didn't see it, not to say it's not in there in the recommended decision. Is there any kind of consensus or idea on how big and how many areas the gas DR pilots that roll out next winter should be? You know, I saw a focus on capacity constrained areas would certainly be ideal. I very much agree. Let's use the tool where the tool is already needed. Makes perfect sense. And also like to try to hit some different geographic areas, especially as far as like climate and temperature in the state. Very much agree with that. Also, to the extent I had some concerns with the Summit County, that there are very different kind of heating system types in different parts of the state that are the more prevalent. And so I think some variability there, especially in terms of understanding what types of systems we're controlling and what size houses we're controlling would be very helpful. But, you know, was there any kind of more structure around how big, like how much load we're looking for and kind of how many different varied geographic areas we're looking at?
Yeah, we didn't have, as you probably saw, we didn't have a whole lot of participation to build much of the record on the gas DR side, not in comparison to the VPP side. And so a lot of what we had was informed by either the study that was entered into the record around that looked at different gas DR programs as they've been implemented in various different places around the country, which are all sort of in pilot phase, and don't always apply to our climate. So I think your point about, you know, the importance of, you know, a variability of regional and climate applications is a really important one for our system. And so through that sort of evaluation of existing pilots and the testimony of Copper Labs, which was really valuable, I think, for a number of these issues. So we didn't get real specific on that, on those components, but I think, you know, absolutely, obviously capacity constraint, the regional variation, climatic variation, and then also, you know, income and equity focus on applications as well, are important components. But yeah, would love to get more of your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll certainly organize more of them for next week. If I presume we're bringing this back next week. Yeah, what I'm thinking, I mean, certainly in size, what we saw in the existing gas DR pilot was really disappointingly small to see it working and to have any results. So significantly bigger than that. I'm thinking hundreds at least enrolled. And then I think we're just going to need a lot better kind of data collection. I think, you know, as public services looking at this, the mechanical system very much matters with regard to how many thermostats you have in the house. What percent of the house are we even controlling with a thermostat? But also with regard to kind of snapback and controllability and how quickly a house can even respond to a temperature change on a thermostat. Very much depends on the heating system type. I think the size of the house would be relevant. So I would very much expect that in the pilot, we are collecting kind of far more usable data about the houses participating. So we can kind of glean intelligence from that and say, okay, we have this many with boilers, this many with furnaces, and really just start to dissect like what sort of performance are we actually seeing? And I would certainly hope, a meaningful number of participants of each type and in different climatic kind of regions so that we could really begin to learn how useful this is. Because, I think certainly the intent would be to use this in NPAs or in other areas to avoid capacity expansions on the system. And so we really have to begin to understand like how reliable are these results, and the details do matter, and they also do vary kind of regionally. And so it would be really helpful to understand more of that. And I think I'm largely fine with them going forward with the pilot. My urgency would be, let's see more actually working for next winter. But I think some of that is really necessary, because what does working mean? We need good data. If we just run this whole thing and don't understand what data we're looking at, it's not so valuable. So I'll try and give it more thought before next week, but just wondering, but that kind of answers my question, that there is not a ton of structure around that. I don't think I would propose next week adding a ton of structure around it, but more maybe adding some thoughts on what would be very helpful things to be tracking and understanding. I don't know the magic number of customers, but certainly it's in the hundreds at a minimum, to make sure we have like reliable data moving forward. Okay, cool. Well, those are my thoughts right now, but really interested to have kind of a more fulsome discussion on this, and appreciate the introduction to how it went. And thank you very much for doing that work for us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those ideas. One other thing, and I wanted to kind of maybe get your thoughts on this as well. And so, and I believe I included this in the decision, but one of the things that I'm really interested in are, particularly as it relates to hybrid heat pump systems. They come with sort of a factory set point. And my understanding is that set point's about 40 degrees, where it shifts from electric to natural gas. And the ability to remotely manage that set point, I think, would be a really valuable thing to be able to do. And I'm not sure if you've had any experience with that or have any information on that. But 40 degrees is kind of useless in the wintertime in Colorado. So I wanted to throw that out there, because it's something that I was thinking about, and you may have some experience or understanding of.
Yeah, I mean, like certainly with regard to heat pumps and when they'll switch to their backup, all the details matter dramatically. And so, yeah, I spent probably a month tinkering with mine, like, okay, what can we do? And I mean, mine was a combination of how long the heat pump has run without satisfying the design temperature, as well as an outdoor temperature, but that's a air to water heat pump, so a little more of a unicorn type situation, but it matters dramatically. I mean, I was able to cut back on when it ran quite a bit. Also the deeper you set back, like at night or when you're not home, in very cold temperatures will trigger backup when it doesn't need to, if you were to lessen that setback. So yeah, like all of these details matter quite a bit, that if the intent is lessen when backup runs, which certainly I've been hearing loud and clear across, whether it's we're looking at impacts on the electric system of electric resistance backup, or on the gas system of essentially maintaining a full-size gas system to serve backup for just a few days a year. These details very much matter. And I somewhat doubt that your average homeowner cares a lot or is going to take the time to go in and see what they are or feel comfortable enough. So I certainly agree, like some, if there's some measure of control here that can help optimize these, that's helpful. But it's also, perhaps more part of contractor training as we're getting heat pumps rolled out, how can we kind of minimize when the backup is running? But it matters to a very large degree. I agree. These like what seemingly small details and inputs in the controllers.
I have a question for you, Commissioner Gilman, before we break. Any thoughts on trying to do a VPP and demand response sort of RFP model contract capacity value as part of the ERP, just as I try and prepare for the discussion next week? Any thoughts, guidance on using that as a means to accelerate this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the ERP, it would just be VPP, like not any gas demand response.
No, I'm not talking gas demand. I'm
Um,
talking electric demand response and VPPs.
Yeah, I would say I am interested. You know, we talked a bit already about demand response, like more discreetly. What I'd want to do is avoid any like confusion or mixed signals in what we expect like the parameters to be between the pilot and that thing. So that would be like my main concern, is that we don't cause more problems than we're solving if we're sending any mixed signals or having, say, like different criteria or different expectations with that and the pilot. But if that would be essentially a third party solicitation to provide these services, the companies providing them here, I guess we'd also have to think about kind of the, perhaps for lack of a better term, like cannibalism of the whole thing, if we're robbing customers from who would have gone in the company's operated program. So I'm a yes, but like I think it's a very interesting concept. I think it's appropriate as we move forward in this early stage. I want to make sure we're not causing more problems than solving. If we do it, there's probably a way. We would just have to give it some thought.
Well, I just think in competitive markets, there's a bunch of bidding that already happens. And I think there's models and RFPs and best practice from that, where those markets rely on more demand response than VPP, but I think both. And there may be ways we can incorporate that, maybe even more quickly into what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's very intriguing. We just probably have to think about the interplay with what we're asking the company to do here and make sure we're not kind of cutting our own success through what we do.
Yep. All right. That's all I had. Anything else on this, Commissioner Plant, before we adjourn?
No, just thanks a lot for having this conversation with me. I'm so happy to be out of my little isolation and can't talk about it with anybody sort of world. So I really appreciate having the conversation and all of your thoughts and ideas. And yeah, so it's great. So I appreciate it.
Happy Valentine's Day to all. And I think we're back at 2 p.m. for a microgrid discussion. And we'll see how cool you think that is, Commissioner Gilman.
It's all cool.
It's all cool. No favorites among this commission. With that, I'll see everybody see you guys at 2. Thanks all. We're adjourned.